Hey guys, and welcome to another one of my MLS offseason reviews. Now, I want to start off and apologize. First of all, I have not uploaded in about a week, and that's because of the whole, snowstorm we had here in Atlanta. I missed a lot of school. I had to make up a lot of schoolwork, and I've had my high school team practices, and just a lot of stuff's been getting in the way. Sorry, I'm not trying to make excuses, but I think we should be back on the regular schedule now, in case anybody was wondering about that. Now, today's team we're going to be talking about is the LA Galaxy. Now, LA Galaxy is the most iconic team in MLS. Obviously, signing David Beckham is probably the biggest move ever made in MLS. Definitely is, actually. And they've since signed Robbie Keane. And of course, they have the most iconic American player in Landon Donovan. So I think when people not in North America think of the MLS, they probably think of LA Galaxy or maybe New York Red Bulls. But I think LA Galaxy is probably the most iconic MLS team. Now, they're also one of the most popular teams because they have been extremely successful in the last few years, winning consecutive MLS Cups over the last couple of years. But this last year wasn't as successful. They were knocked out in the second round of the playoffs by RSL, and that's not usually up to standards with them. They're usually in the final or at least in the conference final. So they were knocked out a bit prematurely, but what are you going to do? It's just how MLS works. Anybody can beat anybody. So their first addition in the offseason was signing Bajio Huzidic from the Swedish league. Now, he is a player who's played in MLS before. He was a midfielder. He's played for Chicago Fire back in 2009, 2010. In 2010, he did not have a very good season, therefore was put into the re-entry draft where he was selected by Colorado. But in fact, he did not sign with Colorado and went to Sweden. So he's now back in MLS playing for the LA Galaxy. And, I mean, we'll see what comes of that. I don't remember too much of him. I just remember a few games he played for Chicago, but I don't remember that much. So we'll see what happens with him. So then the re-entry draft came around not too soon, not pretty soon after that. And they made Sean Franklin available, and he was selected by DC. So Sean Franklin, who has been one of the main players in their back line for a few years now, has now gone to DC. So it's a position they're definitely going to replace. Now, Eddie Johnson became available this offseason mainly because of his contract demands. He wanted a bigger contract. I mean, he deserved a bigger contract, and Seattle was not going to give him a bigger contract. So it was reported that LA Galaxy was actively pursuing him. It seems like the two teams that were closest to getting him was DC United and LA Galaxy. LA Galaxy lost out, and DC got their man. So they did not get their sign. They did not end up signing the forward Eddie Johnson. So that was interesting. I mean, I kind of expected them to get him just because it was going to be a destination that he would be interested in, living in LA, probably get his bigger contract there. But he went to DC, so we'll see what happens there. But they did end up getting another striker. They got 22-year-old Brazilian Samuel from Fluminense in the Brazilian league. Now that's interesting because I think he's an extremely talented player. He's actually also being looked at by Real Madrid Castilla, who is the second division team that Real Madrid loan their players out to or give their players to get some extra first team experience. So that they're also known for having some very talented players. So I think he has a lot of potential. I think he's a talented player. They have him on loan. But I mean, I think he's going to be an exciting player in MLS this year if he really gets some play time. So very, very interesting. Now they lost a player in Jose Villarreal, who I think is extremely talented. He's gone on loan to Cruz Azul and Liga MX, but they do have a buyout option to take him permanently. So it's interesting to see what comes of that. I think he's a very talented player. I remember an absolute belter of a goal he scored against Vancouver a couple of years ago. It shattered my heart, but he's a good player. I really hope he doesn't end up staying in Mexico for too long because I really don't want that to hurt his U.S. men's national team chances because he decides he wants to play for Mexico. So, interesting things there. I think he's a very talented player with a ton of potential, so I'd really like him to be back in MLS and back in America as soon as possible. So, they also signed another player, Rob Friend, from Bundesliga 2 club 1860 Munich. Now, Rob Friend is 32 years old. He's kind of getting a bit older. He's a Canadian striker who spent most of his time in Europe in his career, and he was not getting much playing time at Munich. So LA Galaxy swooped in. He won't be a first-team player, but very suitable backup. I mean, he's been a very stable player in Europe for the last few years and kind of throughout his career. So I think they got a good player there. Hopefully he can get some minutes and, get some Canadian pride in there. So that's really good. So the LA Galaxy also made another trade with trading Hector Jimenez to Columbus along with their first-round draft pick for Columbus's second-round pick and allocation money. So LA Galaxy did not have a first-round draft pick in the draft this year. So when the draft did come along and they got to the second round, I think they got an absolute steal of a pick, picking up Kyle Venter, the center back from the University of New Mexico. Now, this is a Generation Adidas player that fell all the way into the second round, so I thought that was extremely interesting. I think he's a good player. I think he could turn out to be the steal of the draft, falling that low. So I think LA was extremely lucky to have him fall right into their lap. So I expect a lot from Kyle Venter. So another big talking point from the last couple weeks has been LA Galaxy 2, which is a USL Pro team that's going to be joining the league shortly. That basically LA Galaxy are going to be able to loan out their young players to and give their young players to this team, similar to Real Madrid Castilla, which I was talking about earlier, and just give them some extra playing time in the USL Pro. What's interesting about this, though, is the fact that a lot of teams would just partner with an already existing USL Pro team, but what LA Galaxy did was make an entirely new team just for their players. So I think that's really interesting, slightly controversial, but extremely interesting. So we'll see what develops with that, whether other teams start to do a similar thing and the USL Pro just ends up turning into a developmental league. I mean, I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot of controversy with this, so we'll see what happens. Now, another player that they did sign is, over the last couple weeks, they've been talking about that they've signed a foreign wide midfielder, but have not been able to announce who it was. Now, that player is Stefan Ishizaki, who is a Swedish wide midfielder who has spent pretty much the entirety of his career in Sweden. Now, I don't know very much about him because I don't watch much of the Swedish league and don't get much of that on TV, so I have not seen much of him. I looked him up on YouTube, and I mean, obviously everybody looks good on YouTube, but I mean, I can't really say anything. I really don't know, but they seem to value him, so we'll see what happens. He's been brought in basically to rival Robbie Rogers, who obviously had a pretty disappointing season last year. Now, when he was traded from Chicago for Mike Magee, I mean, it always seemed like Chicago was getting a steal in that trade, and it seemed like LA was just getting Rogers to be kind of a publicity stunt, saying we have the first gay player or whatever they were trying to do. I'm not really sure. Maybe they saw the value in him from his years when he was at the peak of his career back in like 2008 to 2010, when I thought he was a very good player. I still think he still has a lot of talent, and hopefully he can fulfill what he's had in the past. I really hope that he can get back out there and play better, but he really needs to improve after last season. Now, I don't think he's ever going to be able to say that draft ever ended up being equal, because Mike Magee has been awesome for Chicago since signing, but we'll see what happens with that. So that's pretty much the LA Galaxy's offseason so far. Now, they still have moves to make. The preseason has started. Interesting stuff. The season's getting started up. I'm getting excited. MLS will be back before we know it. So that's all I have to say today. I really hope you guys enjoyed, and hope you have a good day.